Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show. Discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It's time for the Books That Make You show. And I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you learn how to become an ambassador. What is it like being an ambassador? What does being a diplomat in the Foreign Service even mean? Is this something that we can really explore as a career path? Do we need to be a certain age or at a certain point in our life for this to happen? And how life-changing would that be? Our guest today is somebody who knows a thing or two about being a diplomat, because that's exactly what he's done. Tom Armbruster is our guest, and he has served as the United States ambassador to the Republic of the Marshall Islands under President Barack Obama. He did that from 2012 to 2016. And his book takes us from his active career with the State Department, and one that takes him to all of these different countries. He's been to Russia and Cuba, Finland, all sorts of countries, Denmark, Colombia, Bangladesh, around the world. And he's the only American diplomat to have arrived in the Soviet Union by a kayak. So we're going to have to ask him about that. Tom, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Desiree. Thanks so much.
So, okay, give us the lowdown of your book, because it's part memoir and also part how-to guide. It's a little bit hard for me to explain, so I'm going to acquiesce to you. If you could explain and tell us about your book.
Sure. It really is, I hope, an introduction into Foreign Service life. And you were asking exactly the questions I would get at colleges and universities. And I sort of boiled it down. I'd get hundreds of questions. And I finally realized that what they were asking is, what would Foreign Service life be like for me and my family? And so I tried to explain a little bit about the job, the challenges, what it is like to have kids and a family overseas, and some of the adventures, because that's really, frankly, what kind of hooked me on the Foreign Service career in the first place.
Yeah, so I definitely want to know what it was like to arrive in the Soviet Union by kayak. But first, let's talk about that big picture, because I guess I never thought about being an ambassador as a career choice. When do you start thinking about that? Is it in college? Is it after you had a military career or a political career? Like, when exactly would one consider that?
That's a great question. And I probably never would have considered it. I was 17 years old. And one day my mom said, your cousin, Gil Calloway, who you haven't met, is moving to Moscow and needs help moving boxes. Go to Colombia and help him pack up. And I did, and met the family, and they invited me to live with them for a year in Moscow. And I became their nanny for their three kids. And I was a gym teacher at the Anglo-American school. But it opened my eyes to this career and this lifestyle. And I realized this really is for anybody who's curious, who likes learning languages, and wants to serve. And so I joined at about the average age, about 30. So people sometimes do come right out of college. It's rare, though. Most people have some real life experience, and often they have master's degrees. You asked about military. Many military people find this a great second career. So it does appeal to a wide range of people, and there are several career paths. So if you're a political person, there's one track. Economic, another. Public diplomacy, the people who sort of connect cultures with jazz musicians, NBA coaches, that kind of thing. That's another career track. And then the admin officers who run the embassies and hire the local staff and things like that. And then consular officers who really have some of the most important work, which is protecting American citizens abroad. If there's a disaster, they're the ones who help to evacuate them. They adjudicate visas. So there's some real distinct career pathways for people with different interests.
And you've had quite a wild ride. Okay,
Yeah.
So when we talk about entering the Soviet Union by kayak, when did that happen in your career and why?
That happened early on, 1990, when we went to Finland. At every post, you find some thing you like to do: horseback riding in Cuba, cross-country skiing in Russia. And in Finland, one of the things was kayaking. Our house was right, the backyard was the Gulf, and some Finns invited me to paddle with them from Helsinki, Tallinn, or from Helsinki to Tallinn, and it's across the Gulf of Finland. We paddled 20 some hours, and the Soviet border guard, that was still the Soviet Union for another year or so, looked at my American diplomatic passport and just about died laughing. He just could not believe that an American diplomat would be paddling with this group of Finns. But they let us all in. It was sort of a good time in our relationship for the most part. And it's the one story that wherever I go to speak, people always say, "Tell me about that kayak trip." I sort of wish we were attacked by pirates or something, so it would be more adventurous. But it was mostly just a long paddle.
Well, and that's good, because it kind of, you think for a second there, Soviet Union, you're entering their territory by kayak. That could have gone potentially very badly.
Yes, you're right.
Do you have any situations like that where you might have feared for your life, or you were worried about your safety? Because you've been in some very, hotbed type places.
Yeah, I went to Afghanistan 3 times on temporary duty, and really did not fear for my life there. We had a big military presence and felt well protected in the embassy. But I was coming from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. And at that time, and still today, that's quite a crossroads for the drug trade. And we had American citizens who were killed. I had to really press the local government to get the remains of some Americans back to their families. And I ended up getting a death threat in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico by email. And that was a post that was a little dicey. And one of my State Department colleagues said, "Yeah, I'm glad we got you out of there alive," because I apparently made some enemies. We ended up firing the entire guard force because people were selling visas on the side. We had to shut the consulate down. We had been the number 3 visa processing post in the world. So it was difficult for sure. But I think that is the exception. And for the most part, the Foreign Service they say it's the Peace Corps with air conditioning. It's people have the image of cocktail parties and things like that. It's not quite like that, but they take security very seriously, and diplomatic security, the arm of the State Department that looks after diplomats, they have a pretty low tolerance for risk, and so they do whatever they can to keep us safe.
Yeah. And you've done some very incredible things as well. Just goodness for the world. You convinced the Pentagon at one point to clean up a World War II battleship that was threatening a reef on the Marshall Islands. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. That was the Prince Eugen. And that ship had quite a storied career. It had been a German ship, and at the end of World War II came into U.S. possession. The U.S. towed it to Bikini for one of the 67 nuclear tests that we conducted during the Cold War, and it survived that explosion. It was towed back near Kwajalein, which is where we now have the U.S. Space and Missile Defense Command in the Marshall Islands. Sat on the reef for a long time, but it was still filled with fuel. And the feeling was among the scientists that would visit that it was eventually going to rupture, and that fuel was going to leak and then spill onto the coral reef in Kwajalein. And so I actually had a meeting at the Pentagon with the Secretary of Defense, with a bunch of other ambassadors from Japan and China, and they had big questions. And I said, I have this problem in the Marshall Islands. And about a year later, the military decided that is a threat not only to the Marshall Islands but also to their defense base in Kwajalein. And so they took the steps to take all the oil off, and the ship is still there.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I mean, I have to imagine there's a lot of challenges when it comes to our world with economic imbalances. There's political landmines everywhere you turn. There's lots of just situations because of the pandemic and terrorism, international security, etc. How does one, how do you navigate all of that? What is it like being at the forefront of all of these different issues?
You become an expert in the one issue that you're in charge of. So, for example, in Moscow, I was nuclear affairs officer for a couple of years. And at that point, that was 1997 to 2000, we were cooperating with the Russians and trying to make their nuclear facilities safer, basically put in cameras and alarms and things like that. And so I visited the nuclear plants. The Foreign Service Institute taught me Russian to the advanced professional level. So you become an expert in whatever slice of that big pie you're in charge of. But I think you're right that really the challenges we face now are global challenges. When you think about the health challenges, the environmental challenges, climate change, and so on, these are really issues that we're not going to make progress on unless we do it on pretty much a global basis.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the time your nomination for the 2014 Civil Society Speaker who brought the United Nations delegates to their feet? Can you tell us about you nominated this person? Explain what I'm trying to say.
Her name is Kathy Jetnell Kitchener, Kijiner. She's got her poem on YouTube. But basically, this was at a time when the U.S. was trying to get support for the climate accords, and we were pushing forward the Paris Accords. And the reason it's important for the Marshall Islands is it's an atoll country. So it's only about 6 to 10 feet above sea level, one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to sea level rise. And Kathy Jetnell Kitchener is a poet, and she encapsulated what this threat meant with a poem to her daughter, Matafele Panem. And so she was one of maybe 500 civil society speakers who tried out for the job of getting the UN delegates excited about climate change. Her poem was selected, and she just knocked them out with her sincerity. Her baby was there. And I think it was a way to really capture what does climate change mean to a mom. And this talented poet really did a great job of taking what can be a scientific issue, a political issue, and making it a personal issue. And it was really a wonderful thing to see.
Oh, I love that. And yes, I love poetry, and I love the way it moves us. And it seems like right now poetry is actually making a bit of a resurgence. People are identifying with it again. How does that situation, how did that make you feel? How do you feel after you do something that has an impact on the world?
It feels great. And I did join, as I said, for the adventure, the idea of going off to places and kayaking and all that. But what stays with me are the examples of service, helping there was an American pastor, for example, in Sakhalin, Russia. He was imprisoned. The charges were false, and we worked and finally got him released. And to see him walk out, embrace his family, you can't beat that. It's a wonderful feeling. And a lot of times it is kind of behind the scenes and that sort of thing. And it may affect just one American citizen, but it is really rewarding.
Now, for somebody circling back that actually wants to do this, now that we've piqued their interest and they're going to go out and buy your book and they're going to learn more, what are some of the first steps? How do do they fill out send in their resume? Do they fill out a form? Like how do they take that first step?
First step is careers.state.gov, which is the website, careers.state.gov. It'll explain all those career paths we talked about, but there is a test. You start with a written test, then there's an essay portion. If you pass that, there's an oral assessment, a security background check. It's quite a rigorous and pretty lengthy process, but that is the first step to check out careers.state.gov. And there are also internships. So that's another way to get a little peek into what the career is about and how you can get involved. I wish we were as big as the military so that people could join for a couple of years and then go on to other careers. But it is fairly small. And, you have to decide this is something you want to pursue because it will take some time. But I've met a lot of college students who knew exactly what they wanted to do. They knew all the career paths, and there are people who've determined this is what I want to do. But you can do it up until you're 60, and if you do want to do just one tour, go overseas somewhere, take the test, and then pass, and adjudicate some visas, and see some of the world.
Yeah, what a life-changing, incredible experience that must be, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the writing process. When you were writing this book, did you discover anything about yourself or uncover any hidden truths within you, Tom, that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, that's a great question. I came from a journalism background, and so I did learn to write quickly. I think to be honest about the writing process, I probably should have had yet another editor. I had an editor who did all the commas and all that stuff, but really somebody to have a look at the big picture and say, you mentioned this on page 15. You can cut that and cut that. I think the patience that it takes to really craft a book is incredible. So I have a lot of admiration for authors who do that full time. But it was nice to reflect on the career and kind of look at it as an arc, as a story going from a warehouse in Finland to becoming an ambassador at a small post. But still, it was rewarding. And I think for my wife too, she's a librarian, and it's a good portable profession. She worked all over the world, but she had those moments where she thought, does this really add up to a career at all? And we came back to New York City for a couple of years for an assignment. She had a job, I think it was 3 or 4 days that she had a resume out there, and somebody said, oh, this person has some great experience. And so she was hired in New York. So it can seem a little bit scattershot and like a disparate career, but you will find that you do bid on tours that make sense to you. And so for me, environmental issues were kind of one of the common threads that were worked throughout my career.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you see going forward in the world from the environmental standpoint? Because we were inside the Paris Accord, then we were outside of it, now we're back in. And how do you see the future unraveling on that climate change issue?
Yeah, I think that almost as much as the importance of government in this instance, it really is the corporations and this whole sea change that we're seeing now with the move to electric cars. Everybody still includes climate in their talking points and in their thinking, and I think that's been quite a revolution. It used to be you had to push an environmental issue, it would be highlighted for a while, and then it would go away. But I think we are now weaving this into the fabric of policy, both at the government level and the corporate level. So I can go back and forth, but I'm pretty optimistic right now that people want to do things. They want to reduce their carbon footprint. They want to see the aviation industry, shift to something that is a little cleaner. People are willing to pay for that too, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good. If you're optimistic, then I'm optimistic. Because sometimes it's really scary when you hear the scientific reports, and we're now seeing it. It's no longer a projection, something that's happening in the future. We're feeling the effects of climate change in the here and now.
No, you're right. You're right. But we should stay optimistic, so that I think so that as individuals we take what actions we can, because it is important.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So in writing this book, have you thought of writing another memoir? I mean, it's quite common for somebody who writes that first memoir to realize that they have many stories to tell. And you're one of those people. There's this wealth of information there that you have to share with the world, as well as your experiences. Any ideas of writing in the future?
I took a different tack. I have written another book, a children's book called Pavlos, and it's about a polar bear in the Arctic. And I'm hoping that it's a way to highlight Arctic issues and environmental issues through the eyes of Pavlos the polar bear, and just to introduce kids to some of those issues about the seafood industry, and just for them to identify with this character so that they learn a little bit more about the Arctic. And in fact, the Polar Bear International organization has allowed me to put on the back of the book, for more information, go to this website. And there's also something called the Arctic Council, and they have a website for kids. So I'm able to link educators and parents with some other resources for people interested in the Arctic and the issues they face there, because they really, that climate change is accelerating in the North, and they really are more impacted, I think, than we are at this point. But it's going to impact everybody.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love children's book, and I love, just inspiring young readers as well as bringing issues like that to the forefront. When can we expect that? Is that coming out soon?
I hope so. We've just sent it off to Book Baby, and so I worked with an illustrator in Finland, and I think there were some language issues sometimes, so maybe it slowed us down a little bit, but it should be out soon, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic. And tell everybody again, where can they find an American Foreign Service Odyssey? Find out more about you, find you on social media. Give everybody all of your details if you could.
Sure. That's on bookshop.com. And you can look up Tom Armbruster or how to become an ambassador. I'll give you my promo for the, there we go.
There you go.
The book right there. And it's on Kindle and Amazon as well. And then I'll remind people of the website for the State Department, careers.state.gov, which is also a great resource with lots and lots of things to share about the career.
Excellent. Any parting thoughts that you want to say to somebody who's now considering becoming an ambassador? Any final thoughts for them?
Well, I hope they'll invite me to their swearing in. And no, I do hope people will take the step and take advantage of the opportunity to learn languages, to serve your country, and to really broaden yourself, because as you said, it is a life-changing experience, and it's one that works for families and policy wonks and for a lot of different people. But if I sparked your interest, I would love to see people take that step.
And I think that's something important to point out too, because your wife, her career was able to grow, and it is something, because people would think, oh my gosh, I can't take my children, I can't take my family, but there are lots of opportunities then for one's family, isn't there?
Yes, and often there is usually at least one assignment in your career where you will go unaccompanied for a year to a place like Afghanistan or someplace like that. That's sort of part of the Foreign Service model these days. But the schools overseas are very good. They often have the International Baccalaureate program. Our son was playing soccer in Belgium, and they have these great experiences. And for my daughter, it was a little tougher every time we moved. And I said, gee, kiddo, sorry if your childhood was a little rough. And she said, Dad, I cried every time we moved because I loved every place we lived. So, I think it's a career that you can make work.
Exactly. It's an experience for the entire family. And that is something that not every child, every family gets to share. Oh, yeah. That's so wonderful. Tom, thank you for being here today. It's been a great conversation with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being with us here on the Books That Make You show. You can find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and of course on YouTube. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter as well. We're always sending out information about books and authors, just like Tom's book. Go ahead and hold that up one more time so everybody can take a look at that. Beautiful book. Great advice, memoir / how-to book for people who might want to experience life as an ambassador. Again, Tom, thank you for joining us, and thank you, everybody, for being with us here today on the Books That Make You show. Until next time, all of my book buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.